I'm so excited to show you how I made this fox with watercolors and Posca pens and a whole bunch of love for a friend of mine named Tressa Fox, and she loves it, and I hope you guys like the process too. It was not that difficult. I used watercolors and Posca pens, so if you want to stay tuned and see the process, then do it. And I hope you guys enjoy the video. I'm so very excited if you guys decided to stay and see how I made this little mister. This little fox is amazing. He's precious. He probably should have been easier to do than the process that I did, but I'm no expert. I'm no profesh. This is like my third actual realized watercolor piece. So I started with a line drawing in pencil with some heavy watercolor paper that is smooth. Can't remember if that's cold press or hot press. Somebody, I'm sure, will let me know. I'm using a variety of oranges and siennas and reds and yellows and a couple browns and also a lamp black, I believe it is. And so my general process is to start with the lighter colors and then build up to the darker colors. And I use mostly on this piece a very wet on wet technique. I'm not drenching my paper by any means, but I don't want my color to just soak into the paper wherever I lay it down at. So I have a wash of a lighter color, and then I go in and kind of stipple or dab or chop in the other colors. And when you do the chopping method, use a brush that you're not that into because it's going to split a little bit. And so here I slowed the video down to show you a little bit of the kind of little dots of the colors. I'm obviously dotting in the darker areas where there are shadows and the lighter areas where kind of the light is hitting it a little bit more. And this is a very buildable look. There's probably a way easier way to do this, but I'm a novice. I also flick my puddles of water to create the splashes, and with this older brush that is kind of like split on the ends from the dabbing, I'm using it to kind of brush up some like hairy looking swipes. I don't know whether I'm going to keep them or not. It all depends, but that is what I'm doing. I don't want it to look like he's got like a mohawk, like he's an angry fox. I want him to be a happy little coy fox. And so we'll decide in a little while if we want to keep those spiny kind of flicks of the wrist. And so every time I pick up a new color, I dab it in to the areas that I want that color, and then I just keep going with darker and darker colors. But while I had this kind of honey mixture color, I wanted to go ahead and put the eye in because I usually do the eyes the very first or the very last. But since I had this color made and I'm kind of going rogue and just mixing the colors as I go, I wanted to go ahead and kind of layer this color in while I had it like ready. And while it wasn't kind of, I guess, diluted with all the other colors that I have going on this crazy palette, which is why I have it off screen because it's completely a mess, my palette. And so now I'm going in with some of the shadowy tones. They're the raw umbers and Van Dyke browns. Anywhere that has a slight shadow, I'm putting this color in, just dabbing it just like I did before. I find that when you dab the color on, it's easier to blend it out. The brush I'm using for a lot of this is this number 8. And this is one of my palettes where I'm showing you my actual process. So I'm dipping it in actual straight up tube paint, and my paintbrush is already wet. I guess, I don't know if this counts as a chiseled brush, but I only have the pigment on the very tip, and then the rest of it, the brush is wet. And so I can create that shadow. If it's too watery, then just dab the base of your watercolor brush on a piece of paper, and then I just stipple out my edges. That's just my process. I'm sure there's a way better way to do everything. And this is how I did the hairy brush strokes and some of my splatters as well. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an up close look of how this process goes. And if you just put the color down and you don't like the edge, if it's kind of too harsh of an edge, if you don't like a hard line, then just dip your brush in a little bit more water and just dab it out. This area was a little bit too much, so I'm taking the color off my brush and going in with basically just water and essentially removing some of the color into the brush and then moving that color down further onto the piece to blend it out. Oh my goodness, I hope that makes sense coming out of my face and into your ears, because that's just my inside my head logic. So I hope that made sense. Anyways, now I am proceeding with some brighter oranges, some oranges that have a little bit more of a yellowy or a red undertone, just to give it a little bit more brightness, because those Van Dykes, those umbers can kind of darken it a little bit. I also have some browns with siennas mixed into it. I'm also adding splatters and little puddles every time I have some color that I think would look good on the perimeter of the fox, the outside areas. And so I'm essentially just moving all the way across the whole surface. Every time I make a new color, I'm kind of dabbing it in. It's always easier to have a photo reference. I kind of did, but kind of didn't. But having a reference definitely helps, or a few references. So onward with my little dabbing process. I kind of lost some of my pencil lines in this, so that's another reason why it's best to keep it lighter in the beginning until you get some of the highlights set in and some of the dark areas set in. And then it doesn't really matter where your lines go, but I kind of just went ham and lost my lines, so we're going to just make them up as I go, and that's fine. Because it's watercolor, it's abstract. It's not like there are any foxes out there with fur splattering off of them, so it's not supposed to be fully hyper realistic anyways, but I want to try to keep it as close to that as possible, at least have features so it's recognizable. Also, now I'm dabbing in some yellows and caramels with a bit of white mixed into it, and those are less translucent. They're going to be a little bit more cloudy. And so I try to reserve those for more towards the end, because it's just easier for me to control them when I have other color down under them. Eventually I may change this, but currently in this moment, that's how I do it. I also like this stippling or dabbing technique because my watercolors are very loose anyways, and so are fur textures. This to me is the easiest way for me to replicate fur without having any actual experience with the watercolor. I will eventually do some research myself on it, but until then, this is my process, and I'm fine with it. So now I'm getting closer to wanting to do detail work and darken the white in the face as well. And so I'm going to use some of these caramels and some of the whites and some of the yellows as well as the grays in that area. In theory, things change at the drop of a hat with me. So I'm trying to stipple in some of the white around the face and then the dark around the shadows at the same time, because I have no concept of trying to keep on one color scale. I just think something needs to be fixed and then I go in and do it. So I thought we were going to work on the neck, but apparently we're going to do that in a minute. So now that my fox is really starting to take shape, it makes me super excited to hurry up and finish it, but I try my best not to kind of rush the process, because for me personally, when I get excited about finishing a piece, I tend to cut steps, so don't do that. So just like before, I darkened just the tip of my brush with the Van Dyke and the raw umber, and the rest of my brush is wet. So that's my process with adding in any of my dark lines, any of my shadows, it's the same currently as a filming. That's my favorite way to do things. And I just stipple and add water to blend it out. Add my dark lines, water, stipple to blend it out. And when you stipple, like I said before, try to use a brush that isn't your favorite or the most expensive, because this is a really good way to ruin your brushes. Or just don't stipple too vigorously. I'm not going all the way down to the roots of the paintbrush when I do my stippling. It's just on the tip so that I have as little damage as possible. And now in the tail area, I'm just sweeping in some darker colors to kind of separate the tail from the back of the body, the body itself. And I went in with one color. It was too dark, so I kind of blended that out. And that's kind of the amazing thing about watercolor to me, is that you can take it away or cover it, but it's still a transparent color. And that to me is something that is very important, because it's easy to make a mistake, especially with stuff that's so fluid. Personally, I do a lot of fluid art, resin, acrylics, alcohol inks, watercolors, and the ability to fix a mistake as easily and as quickly as possible without having to wait for something to cure or dry is amazing. So I'm really enjoying that part about the watercolor process. Also, if you have any ideas of what you want me to paint next, please leave me a comment down below, because I'm open for suggestions. Also for commissions. Hint, hint. So I'm giving some sweeping hair type of brush strokes. And I don't know if I'm going to keep them at this point as I'm painting them. They seem kind of separated from the rest of the piece because it's so kind of cloudy and splotchy, whereas the tail is now, while a little bit off screen. I'll move the paper in a second. It's a little bit too refined for the mess of application that I have for the rest of it. So we'll go back and fix it in a little bit. So I'm using grays and white, titanium white based grays as well. I'm mixing like lamp and carbon with white to make it opaque and cloudy. And then I'm trying to add some darker tones of the same mixture to kind of show where the shadowy bits are. And then I didn't wait for the rest of it to dry before doing this, so I have a lot of water on the neck area and it's just moving too much. So we're gonna just dab that up and just wait for it to dry a little bit more and just work on the eye because it's kind of the same color. I'm using one of the chisel tip brushes, I think, to just give our fox some foxy eyeliner and to cut the crease and to outline the, what is it, iris? I think it's the iris in the eye. And add some shadow with the brow bone, or I guess maybe it's an eyelid. It's probably more of brow bone. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm sorry this angle is not the most viewer friendly. I'm going to change my angle to something more eye level. Nope. Ground level. Something with a better angle so you can see actually the paint strokes on my next piece. And every time I have a darker gray, I'll add it into the ears, the nose, the neck, and anywhere else that I have a black toned shadow or line. And then with every darker color, I'll go into those same areas. And that's kind of just how I build my shadows. But then, like in this neck area, it gets a little bit too dark. And so I'll have to go in a while and brighten it up a bit. So in these ears, I'm trying to create depth with the same grays from the neck. And then I'm blending it in with the brighter oranges. If you find that your oranges, if you do this piece, don't blend into the black very well, then mix just a little bit of white into your oranges and it'll work a little bit better because it'll make it a little bit more opaque, and so it'll kind of blend into the ear a little bit better, in my opinion. So now I'm just dabbing darker colors. With every dark color I make, I go into the ears, the nose, the neck, the ears, the nose, the neck, every time. And also I'm noticing now that I kind of gave my fox a little bit of a chubby neck. And so I'll have to go in and fix that in a bit. So I also realized I didn't have any splatter with the black and it kind of looked disconnected. So I'm adding some black splatter as well. You don't want to make this too dark because it'll be distracting. If you notice, even the ears aren't jet black, at least not right now. They're just a dark gray because we build our color. That's what makes things more realistic even when they're not. Like this fox is not realistic, but it's very recognizable what it should be, you know? Also with the mouth, you don't want to draw a solid dark black line because nothing else in the piece is the solid black dark line, and that would just be super distracting. So I'm building up the kind of smile in the fox as I build the dark colors on my paintbrush and in the ears, the eyes, and the nose. I hope that makes sense. So now we have all of the darker parts done, and it's time to, I say darker parts, but I meant the blacky gray eyes, ears, nose shade. And now we can go in with the Posca pen. I really like adding Posca pen to my watercolors because it's a water-based pigment that you can just blend out as long as you get to it fast enough. If you don't, then it's there for life. But what I'm doing is going in and stippling in some white Posca pen or giving it some squiggles, and then taking my stippling watercolor paintbrush and just blending that out. I'm not taking away all the dark from the face. I'm just adding kind of highlights or light wispies of the white. I'm really taking care to make sure that I'm using my stipple brush because I want to have that fuzzy hair-esque looking. It's so hard to explain. I hope you guys understand the things that I'm trying to show you, but who knows? Who knows? But I appreciate you guys watching and listening to me babble. You're also welcome to mute me and then just paint along as well. Also, should I do a paint along with me to a watercolor piece and do kits? What do you guys think? Leave me a comment down below. So I've been kind of not doing that much around the snout of the fox because it's supposed to be really white. And so there's a slight bit of a cream hue to it. And now I'm going in and adding the white to brighten it. But I did add a little bit of cream to kind of give something for my white highlight with the Posca pen to bounce off of, so it's not just one solid color, but it's not too dark, but it's not too light. Hope that makes sense. So I'm also adding the white highlights to other areas of the fox. You'll see like just then the white kind of melts into some areas because the substrate has still a lot of water on it, but not too much because then that'll mess up your look. So I'm also adding highlights to the ears, and I'm also adding color to blend in any white areas that kind of looked disconnected. Also, something to remember is when you dab color on, you're going to leave kind of you're going to leave color, and then you're going to leave kind of a darker mark, like a little puddle within your puddle of color where the tip of your paintbrush comes off last. Assuming it comes off last. Whatever comes off last of your paintbrush from your paper, you're going to get a little darker puddle. And I used to try to remove that for some reason. But it just blends out, so don't waste time like I did. I'm also adding highlight to the ear tip areas, as well as the nose and any high points in the tail or body. I also really like a squiggle look with a lot of my artwork. Down here on the bottom of the tail, didn't like it as much, but on other parts of the body, I'm gonna attempt to use some of the squiggles that I incorporate into my other artwork. So that may not be for everybody. It's your prerogative if you like things like that. If not, absolutely don't include it. Could be just me. It's fine. There's also a highlight on the nose and on the brow bone that I'm stippling in with this paintbrush. I could have done it with just watercolor whites, but I don't control those as easily as I control the Posca with a paintbrush. So that's why I do it this way. If you guys have watercolor artists that you follow and it, whatever I'm trying to say makes more sense on their channel, please link their channel or comment their name, because I'm definitely into learning more about this. So now in my signature area, I thought I'd be cool and crafty and then leave a watercolor puddle to sign my name in. Wasn't as easy as I thought it would be to do this part, but that's okay. So I'm just creating a cloud for my signature because I wanted to do it in white. But then I realized that that may not be the best, but you'll see. So I'm taking a white, very fine tip Posca pen and signing my name, my new name, because I'm married. Ew. And it was impossible to see even with going over it and letting it dry in between. So we decided we were going to add kind of some shadow with a paintbrush because I didn't have a gray fine point Posca pen. So I got most of the water out of my paintbrush and just dipped the tip of my paintbrush into the drier areas of my gray color that I was using for the neck, the nose, and the ears. And then I just added that to one side of, I was going to do it to just the shadow areas of my signature, but that went rogue, so we just decided to sign across the whole thing again. But I think the white added a unique little highlight area on its own, and I like it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you like my little fox, my little foxy fox. I really like my fox, and I would love to know your guys' thoughts. What would you have changed? What do you like? What do you not like? And what should I paint next? I'm happy to hear from you guys. Be kind to one another because you never know what someone's going through. And always remember that we do the test so you don't have to. And we'll see you guys on the next video. Bye. I said bye.